Kang Jae-suk was not asleep. His eyes were closed, yes. His breathing was slow, measured, almost peaceful. His body leaned back into the wide black leather chair like a man who had finally let go of the world for a moment. But behind those closed eyes, Kang Jae-suk was fully awake. Listening, counting, waiting. At 42, Kang Jae-suk didn't sleep like normal men. He hadn't for years. Sleep was for people who trusted the world. People who believed tomorrow would arrive without betrayal. That kind of thinking had almost killed him once. He'd learned his lesson. Now he rested only enough to think clearly. The study around him was silent, thick with power. Dark wood walls. Heavy shelves filled with books no one ever touched. A glass case holding family relics that survived war, hunger, and bloodshed. And on the desk directly in front of him, an open briefcase. No lock. No lid. Just money. Stacks of crisp bills laid out neatly. $20,000, sitting in plain sight like it belonged there. Like it was meant to be taken. That was the point. Kang Jae-suk believed one thing with absolute certainty. Give people a chance to steal without consequences, and they always would. Always. He had tested this truth his entire life. Employees. Family. Partners. Lovers. Some took a little. Some took a lot. Some tried to be clever. Some cried when they were caught. But they all reached for it in the end. That belief had built his empire. It had kept him alive. It had turned him into the man everyone feared. And today, he was running the test again. The housekeeper had been scheduled to clean the study while he was away. But plans changed. They always did. That was fine. Tests worked best when people didn't know they were being tested. The door creaked open. Kang Jae-suk felt it immediately. A pause followed. The kind of pause that told him whoever entered hadn't expected to see him there. He kept his eyes shut. Footsteps moved slowly across the floor. Light ones. Careful. Female. He recognized her steps from past mornings. The black woman who cleaned quietly and never lingered. She did her work like someone who couldn't afford mistakes. Her name was Nia Carter. He knew that much because he knew everything about the people who worked for him. Nia Carter was poor. Single mother. No family support. A son, 7 years old. Living in a place Kang Jae-suk would never step foot in unless there was money to collect. She cleaned because cleaning paid better than nothing. She cleaned because quitting wasn't an option. Her heartbeat was loud. Kang Jae-suk could hear it from where he sat. Then something else entered the room. Another presence. Smaller. Lighter. Kang Jae-suk's attention sharpened. That wasn't part of the plan. The child stayed close to her. Almost pressed against her legs. Kang Jae-suk could sense it the way hunters sense movement in tall grass. The boy didn't move like someone curious. He moved like someone scared. Nia froze. Kang Jae-suk waited. Her breathing picked up. He imagined her eyes locking on the briefcase. The money. The risk. She knelt. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Urgent. Tight. The kind of voice mothers use when fear is swallowing them whole. Kang Jae-suk couldn't hear the words clearly, but he didn't need to. He'd seen the scene play out in 100 different ways. She was warning the boy. Don't touch anything. Don't speak. Don't mess this up. The money sat there. Open. Patient. Kang Jae-suk waited for the familiar shift. The moment when temptation slipped into calculation. But instead of footsteps drifting toward the desk, something unexpected happened. They stayed far away. Nia moved fast. Too fast. She was cleaning like someone racing against disaster. Her hands shook. Cloth brushing shelves. Items returned to their place with careful precision. She was afraid. Good. Fear revealed people too. Minutes passed. Then a sound crackled from the hallway outside. A radio. An order. Nia stiffened. Kang Jae-suk felt the hesitation in her body even without opening his eyes. The impossible choice pressing down on her chest. If she ignored the call, she would lose the job. If she left, she would leave her son in a room with a man people whispered about like a warning. Her fear doubled. She knelt again. Her whisper was sharper now. Commanding. The boy didn't argue. He listened. Kang Jae-suk sensed her backing away. The door closed. The lock clicked softly. And, just like that, the test truly began. The room was quiet again. Just Kang Jae-suk, the boy, and $20,000. Kang Jae-suk counted seconds in his head. Children were the easiest. They didn't understand consequences. They acted on impulse. Curiosity always won. 30 seconds passed. Nothing. 1 minute. Still nothing. Kang Jae-suk felt the shift before he heard it. The boy moved. Slowly. Not toward the desk. Toward him. That wasn't right. Kang Jae-suk's pulse changed. The child took one careful step. Then another. The briefcase remained untouched. Kang Jae-suk waited for the sound of paper. The slide of money. It never came. Instead, a soft squeak. Rubber against wood. A small hand hovered near his arm. Kang Jae-suk's mind sharpened. This was wrong. The boy leaned closer. Close enough that Kang Jae-suk could feel warmth through the air. Then, a gentle touch. Light. Careful. Not stealing. Checking. A small voice followed, barely louder than a breath. Sir, are you okay? The words landed like a blow. Kang Jae-suk's thoughts stalled. That question hadn't been asked in decades. Not by enemies. Not by allies. Not by blood. The child didn't look at the money. Didn't reach for it. Didn't calculate. He reached for the man instead. And in that moment, Kang Jae-suk felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Something dangerous. Something he had buried a long time ago. Concern. And as the boy lifted his small hand again, this time toward Kang Jae-suk's forehead, the man who believed no one was good realized his test might be destroying the only truth he had ever trusted. If this opening already stirred something in you, don't scroll past it like it meant nothing. Subscribe now. Because what this child does next doesn't just change his life, it breaks a man who thought he couldn't be broken. And the moment the door bursts open behind them, nothing will ever be the same. Nia Carter learned early that fear could be useful if you didn't let it paralyze you. Fear paid her rent. Fear put food on the table. Fear kept her showing up to places she didn't belong, scrubbing floors she would never own, inside homes built on money she would never touch. The mansion sat on the edge of the city, like it didn't belong to the same world as hers. Tall gates. Quiet guards. Cameras everywhere. The kind of place that made your shoulders tense the moment you stepped inside. Nia had worked there for almost a year. Long enough to know the rules. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look directly at the boss. Don't ask questions. Do your job and leave. She followed those rules because breaking them meant losing everything. The other staff whispered about Kang Jae-suk when they thought no one important was listening. In the kitchen. In the laundry room. In the supply closet where the air smelled like bleach and exhaustion. They said he didn't shout. Didn't threaten. Didn't need to. They said people who disappointed him didn't get second chances. Sometimes they didn't get references. Sometimes they didn't get seen again. Nia never joined those conversations. Not because she didn't believe them. Because believing them too deeply would make her hands shake. And shaking hands led to mistakes. Mistakes were expensive. This job was the only thing standing between her son and the kind of life she had promised herself he would never grow up in. Micah didn't know how close they lived to falling backward. He was 7. Smart. Too observant for his age. The kind of child who noticed when his mother skipped meals and pretended she wasn't hungry. The kind who stopped asking for things once he realized asking came with guilt. That morning had already gone wrong before they ever reached the mansion. The neighbor who sometimes watched Micah didn't answer her phone. The older woman down the block had moved out without warning. His school had a teacher meeting and closed early. Every option collapsed one by one until Nia was left standing in their tiny apartment, Micah's backpack on the chair, the clock ticking louder than it should. She stared at her phone, then at her son, then at the clock again. If she didn't go to work, she'd be fired. If she took Micah, she risked everything. She hated that choice. Hated that the world made her pick between money and safety. Micah, she said finally, kneeling in front of him. Her voice was steady even though her chest felt tight. You remember what I told you about today? Micah nodded. He nodded too quickly, like he wanted to prove he understood. I'm going to work, she continued. You're going to stay where I tell you. You don't touch anything. You don't talk to anyone. You don't move unless I say so. I know, Mama, he said. I'll be quiet. She looked at his face longer than necessary. Children didn't belong in places like that mansion. But poverty didn't care about what belonged where. The drive there was quiet. Micah watched the city change through the window. Small buildings turning into glass and stone. People like them disappearing from the sidewalks. At the gate, the guard barely looked at them. Nia's uniform gave her just enough permission to exist there. Inside, she walked faster than usual, Micah close behind her. Staff moved around them with purpose, eyes down, mouths closed. No one asked questions. Questions were dangerous. She tucked Micah into a narrow service hallway near the supply room. It wasn't comfortable. Bare walls. A faint hum from machines behind the doors. But it was hidden. She crouched down, holding his shoulders. This is important, she said softly. You stay right here. No matter what you hear. No matter who walks by. What if I get scared? Micah asked. Her throat tightened. Then you think about me, she said. And you remember I always come back. He nodded again. She stood, smoothed her uniform, and took a breath she didn't feel. That was when her supervisor's voice came through the radio. Nia. Change of assignment. Her stomach dropped. She pressed the radio closer to her ear. You're needed upstairs. Private study. The words landed heavy. Every cleaner knew about that room. Only one person cleaned it at a time. No mistakes. No shortcuts. And never when the boss was inside. Nia's first thought was Micah. Her second was the open space between having a job and not having one. She swallowed. Yes, she said into the radio. I'm on my way. She turned back to Micah, her heart pounding harder now. I have to clean one room, she whispered. I'll be fast. Can I come? Micah asked. Her mind raced. No, she said immediately. You stay here. But as she straightened, footsteps echoed nearby. Staff moved through the hallway. Someone glanced their way. Nia made a decision she would replay in her head for years. Okay, she said quietly. But you do exactly what I say. Micah's eyes widened. She grabbed an extra pair of oversized cleaning gloves from the supply cart and slid them onto his small hands. They stay on, she said. You don't touch anything without them. He smiled a little. Proud to help. That smile hurt her more than fear ever had. They walked toward the study together. The door was heavy. Dark wood. Cold handle. Nia pushed it open. And her breath left her body. Kang Jae-suk sat in the chair. Eyes closed. Still. Too still. The open briefcase on the desk caught her eye instantly. Money. More money than she had ever seen in one place. Her pulse roared in her ears. She dropped down beside Micah, gripping his shoulders tighter than she meant to. Listen to me, she whispered. That man is the boss. You don't touch anything. You don't speak. You don't even breathe loud. Do you understand? Micah nodded, eyes wide now, fear finally settling in. She pointed to a corner. You sit there. You don't move. She stood, forcing herself to work. Every second stretched. Every sound felt loud. She kept looking back at Micah, then at the man in the chair, then at the money she refused to look at for more than a heartbeat. She finished faster than she ever had in her life. Just as she reached for Micah, the radio crackled again. Emergency. West Wing. Water leak. Her body went cold. She looked at Micah, then at Kang Jae-suk, then at the door. The choice closed in around her like a trap. She bent down one last time, her voice barely holding together. Stay exactly where you are, she whispered. Don't move. Then she stepped out. The door clicked shut. And Nia Carter walked away from her child, praying the world wouldn't punish him for her poverty. If you've ever carried fear like this, if you've ever had to choose between survival and safety, subscribe now. Because the next moment inside that room will decide whether this mother loses everything, or whether something impossible is about to happen. The door to Kang Jae-suk's private study was heavier than it looked. Nia felt it the moment her hand touched the handle. Cold metal. Solid. Final. Like the door itself was warning her to turn back while she still could. She pushed anyway. The room opened up slowly, and her body reacted before her mind could catch up. Her breath stopped. He was there. Seated in the wide leather chair behind the desk, head tilted slightly to one side, eyes closed. Kang Jae-suk. The man people whispered about like he wasn't fully human. The man no one ever wanted to see unexpectedly. For half a second, Nia hoped he was dead. The thought shocked her. She pushed it away immediately, guilt rushing in right after it. She didn't wish death on anyone. She just wished, desperately, that he wasn't here. But he was. And worse than that, he looked calm. Too calm. Her eyes dropped without permission. The briefcase on the desk was open. Wide open. Money sat inside like it was proud to be seen. Neatly stacked. Clean. Untouched. The kind of money that didn't belong to people like her. Her heart slammed hard against her ribs. Every instinct screamed danger. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Then she felt a small tug at her sleeve. Micah. She looked down at her son and saw the fear spreading across his face, slow and deep. He hadn't noticed the money yet. He was focused on her reaction. Children always were. She dropped to her knees in front of him immediately. Her hands found his shoulders, gripping a little too tight. "Listen to me," she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. "This is serious. That man is the boss." Micah's eyes flicked past her toward the chair. "He's sleeping," he whispered back. She shook her head sharply. "No," she said. "He just looks like it." She leaned closer, lowering her voice even more. "You don't touch anything. You don't speak. You don't move. You don't even breathe loud." His mouth opened, then closed. Fear settled fully now. "If he wakes up and sees you here," she stopped herself. She couldn't finish that sentence. Not with Micah looking at her like that. She pointed to the far corner of the room. "You sit right there. You stay there. Mama will be fast." Micah nodded. "Once. Slow. Serious." He walked to the corner and sat down, pressing his back against the wall like he was trying to disappear into it. The oversized yellow gloves swallowed his hands. They looked ridiculous in a room built on power and silence. Nia stood. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to move. She started cleaning. Every sound felt too loud. The soft brush of cloth against wood. The quiet clink of something being moved an inch to the left. The faint hum of the lights overhead. Her eyes kept drifting back to the chair. Kang Jae-suk didn't move. Didn't shift. Didn't react. She couldn't tell if he was truly asleep or if he was just pretending. That uncertainty was worse than anything else. She cleaned the shelves first. Then the table near the window. She avoided the desk completely. Avoided the briefcase like it might bite her if she looked at it too long. Her hands shook. She wiped them on her uniform and kept going. Time felt wrong in that room. Stretched. Heavy. Like the air itself didn't want to move. She glanced at Micah again. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, eyes on the floor like she'd taught him. He looked so small. Too small to be carrying this kind of fear. Guilt crept in. This was her fault. She'd brought him here. She'd put him in this position because the world had backed her into a corner. She finished the last shelf and reached for her cart. Almost done. Almost safe. She took one step toward Micah. That was when the radio crackled. Her blood turned cold. "Nia," the voice said. "Emergency. West Wing. Water leak. We need you now." Her head snapped toward the door. Then back to Micah. Then to Kang Jae-suk. He hadn't moved. The money still sat there. Open. Watching. Her chest tightened so hard it hurt. If she didn't answer, she'd be fired. She knew that. Emergencies weren't suggestions. They were tests of loyalty. If she left. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She walked back to Micah and knelt again, her hands shaking now. "Stay exactly where you are," she mouthed. "Don't move." Micah nodded, but his eyes were shiny now. She stood quickly, afraid she'd change her mind if she didn't. The walk to the door felt longer than the walk in. Her hand closed around the handle. She hesitated. Just one more second. She looked back. Micah sat in the corner. The boss sat in the chair. The briefcase stayed open. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Then Nia pulled the door open and stepped out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. And inside the study, for the first time, Micah was truly alone. The silence wrapped around him. He stayed still, just like his mother told him. Seconds passed. Then more. His legs started to ache. His heart beat loud in his ears. He risked a glance toward the chair. The man hadn't moved. Micah frowned. Something about him didn't look right. His head was tilted awkwardly. His breathing sounded heavy. Not peaceful. Not calm. Micah remembered his grandma breathing like that once. When she was sick. He shifted slightly, then froze, remembering his mother's voice. Don't move. But what if someone needed help? What if this man was in trouble? Micah swallowed. His small hands curled inside the yellow gloves. And slowly, very slowly, he stood up. If this part of the story is making your chest feel tight, don't ignore that feeling. Subscribe now, because what Micah does next is the moment that changes everything. And not everyone is ready for it. The radio crackled again, louder this time, sharper. Nia. West Wing. Now. The voice didn't ask. It didn't explain. It didn't care what she was in the middle of. Nia's body reacted before her mind could slow it down. Her shoulders stiffened. Her chest tightened. That familiar panic rose fast, the kind that always came when she had seconds to choose between two bad options. She looked at the door. Then at Micah. Then at the man in the chair. Kang Jae-suk still hadn't moved. If she ignored the call, she knew what would happen. She'd be marked. Written up. Watched more closely. And the next mistake, no matter how small, would be the last one. Fired meant eviction. Eviction meant the shelter. The shelter meant Micah sleeping with one eye open. But if she answered the call, her eyes stayed on her son. Micah sat exactly where she'd told him to sit. His back straight. His hands resting in his lap inside the oversized yellow gloves. He looked like a child trying very hard to be invisible. She felt something twist deep in her chest. No mother should ever have to make this choice. She walked back to him slowly, every step heavier than the last. She knelt again, pulling him close, her hands warm on his shoulders. Listen to me, she whispered. Her voice was tight now, stretched thin. I have to step out for a minute. Micah's eyes lifted to hers. Why? He whispered. She swallowed. Because Mama has to keep this job. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for more explanation. He learned early that questions didn't always get answers. She pointed again to the corner, even though he was already there. You stay right here, she said. You don't move. No matter what you hear. No matter what happens. What if he wakes up? Micah asked, his voice shaking just a little. Her breath caught. If he wakes up, she said carefully, you stay quiet. You don't speak. You don't touch anything. She paused, then added, softer, Mama will be right back. That part was a promise she prayed she could keep. She stood, forcing herself not to linger. If she stayed any longer, she might not leave at all. And that would ruin everything anyway. Her hand reached for the door. She hesitated. Just one more look. Micah nodded at her. Brave. Trying to be strong because he thought that was what she needed. That hurt more than fear ever had. She opened the door and stepped out. The door closed behind her. Click. The sound was quiet, but it landed hard. Like a lock snapping into place. Inside the study, the silence changed. Micah felt it immediately. Without his mother's presence, the room felt bigger. Heavier. Like it was watching him. He stayed still. He counted in his head the way his teacher taught him when he got nervous. 1, 2, 3. The man in the chair didn't move. The money stayed on the desk, open and bright. Micah tried not to look at it. He really did. But it sat right there, impossible to ignore, like it was waiting for something. He looked away. His legs started to ache. The floor was hard. his back pressed against the wall. His heart beat too fast. He counted again. 10, 11, 12. The room made quiet sounds. The kind you notice when everything else goes silent. The soft hum of lights. The faint sound of breathing. Breathing. Micah frowned. He looked toward the chair again. The man's chest rose and fell, but not evenly. It sounded thick. Heavy. Like he was struggling a little. Micah remembered that sound. He'd heard it when his grandma got sick last winter. She'd sat in her chair breathing like that, eyes closed, skin cold when he touched her forehead. No one had noticed at first. Micah shifted slightly, then froze. Don't move. Mama said don't move. He pressed his back harder against the wall, trying to ignore the feeling in his stomach. But the breathing didn't change. If anything, it sounded worse. Micah's small hands clenched inside the gloves. What if this man was sick? What if he needed help? What if no one came back in time? He looked at the door, then back at the chair, then at the money. The money didn't matter. Not like this. Micah stood slowly, his movements careful, like the floor might shout if he moved too fast. The yellow gloves squeaked softly. He stopped, heart racing. The man didn't react. Micah took one step forward, then another. Every instinct told him this was dangerous. His mother's voice echoed in his head, sharp and urgent. Don't touch anything. But people mattered more than rules. That was something his mother had taught him too, even if she never said it out loud. He moved closer to the chair, close enough now to see the man's face. He looked older up close, tired, lines around his eyes that didn't soften even when he slept. Micah lifted his hand slowly. He didn't think about the money. He didn't think about punishment. He thought about his grandma. He thought about how scared he'd been when she didn't wake up right away. His gloved fingers hovered over the man's arm, then gently touched it. The skin was cool. Micah's breath caught. Sir, he whispered, his voice barely a sound. Are you okay? The man didn't answer. Micah leaned in closer, worry flooding his chest. He reached up toward the man's forehead, the way he'd seen his mom do so many times. And behind closed eyes, Kang Jae-suk felt every movement, every sound, every breath. The boy hadn't touched the money. He hadn't even looked at it. He'd come to him instead. And for the first time in years, Kang Jae-suk felt something he couldn't control begin to rise. If this moment is hitting closer to home than you expected, stay connected. Subscribe now. Because the choice this child is making right now is about to collide with a man who built his life on believing no one was good. Micah stood still for a moment after touching the man's arm. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. He half expected shouting, or the man's eyes to fly open, or strong hands to grab him and pull him close. None of that happened. The man stayed still. Too still. Micah leaned back just a little and looked at him more closely now, the way a child does when worry starts pushing past fear. From this close, the man didn't look scary. He looked uncomfortable. His head leaned at an odd angle against the chair. His jaw was tight. His chest rose and fell unevenly, like each breath took effort. Micah frowned. That's not right, he whispered to himself. He remembered that sound. That heavy breathing. He remembered sitting on the edge of the couch when his grandma got sick, watching her chest move like it was carrying something heavy inside. He remembered touching her forehead and feeling how cold it was, even though she said she was fine. Grown-ups said they were fine when they weren't. Micah swallowed. He glanced at the desk. The money was still there. Bright. Open. Waiting. He looked away from it immediately. It didn't matter. Not when someone looked like this. Micah stepped closer to the chair, his movements slow and careful. The rubber gloves squeaked softly with each step, and every sound made his shoulders tense. He stopped beside the chair. Up close, the man smelled like something sharp and clean. Not like soap. Not like home. Like a place Micah didn't know. He reached out again, this time touching the man's hand more firmly. It felt heavy. Warm, but not the way hands usually felt. Sir, Micah whispered again. Can you hear me? Nothing. Micah's chest tightened. What if he was really sick? What if he fell asleep like this and didn't wake up? Micah looked toward the door. His mother had promised she'd come back. But promises took time. And time didn't always wait for people. He lifted his hand again, slowly, and touched the man's shoulder. It was tense under his fingers, like the man had been holding himself tight even while sleeping. Micah did what he'd seen his mother do so many times. He reached up and gently adjusted the man's collar, trying to straighten it so his neck wasn't bent so awkwardly. The movement was clumsy, small fingers doing their best. The gloves squeaked again. Behind closed eyes, Kang Jae-suk felt everything. The child wasn't grabbing. Wasn't sneaking. Wasn't rushing. He was fixing him. That wasn't part of the test. Micah leaned closer, his face full of concern now. Fear was there, yes, but something else had taken over. The need to help. The need to check. You're breathing funny, Micah whispered. Like my grandma did when she got sick. He hesitated, then did something he'd never done to a stranger before. He pulled one glove off. The yellow rubber slipped from his small hand and fell softly to the floor. Micah placed his bare palm gently against the man's forehead. The skin felt cool. Micah's eyes widened. You're cold, he whispered. That's not good. His voice trembled now. Not from fear, but from worry. Should I get help? He murmured, mostly to himself. Mama said I shouldn't leave, but if you're really sick. He stood there, torn, his small hand still resting on the man's forehead. He didn't know this man. He didn't know why people were afraid of him. He only knew what he saw. Someone who might need help. The money stayed untouched. Not once did Micah glance at it. Not once did his hand drift toward the desk. His focus never left the man in the chair. Kang Jae-suk's mind raced behind closed eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Children always noticed the money. Even when they didn't understand its value, they understood it meant something. They reached. They touched. They tested. This child had walked right past $20,000 like it wasn't even there. Instead, he had offered concern. Real concern. The kind Kang Jae-suk hadn't felt in decades. Micah pulled his hand back slowly and slipped the glove back on, the rubber squeaking softly as he did. He adjusted the man's collar again, trying to make him comfortable. I'll stay quiet, Micah whispered. Mama said not to wake you. But if you need help, I can go get her. He took a small step back, giving the man space, just like he'd seen nurses do on TV. Then he waited. Inside the chair, Kang Jae-suk felt something crack. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough to hurt. He had built his entire life on the belief that people only cared when there was something to gain. That kindness was a mask. That loyalty was a transaction. This boy had nothing to gain. And yet he had given everything that mattered. The test was failing. Or maybe the test was working in a way Kang Jae-suk had never prepared for. And just as Micah started to wonder if he should really break his mother's rules, the door behind him suddenly flew open. If your heart is racing right now, you're not alone. Subscribe, because the next moment brings the fear every parent dreads, and a truth no one in that room is ready for. Nia didn't remember running back to the study. Later, she wouldn't remember the stairs, or the hallway, or how her legs carried her faster than they ever had before. All she remembered was the sound of her own heartbeat pounding, so loud it drowned out everything else. Fear did that. It erased everything except the thing you were afraid of losing. Her mind had played the worst pictures on repeat the entire time she ran. Micah crying. Micah being dragged away. Micah standing alone while she begged too late. By the time she reached the door, her chest burned. Her hands shook so badly she almost missed the handle. She shoved the door open. Micah. The name tore out of her raw, sharp, broken. What she saw stopped her heart. Micah was standing beside the chair. Too close. Much too close. One glove lay on the floor. The boss sat there, no longer just a shape of fear, but a presence filling the room. And the briefcase. Still open. Still full. Still untouched. Her stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling from a height. For a split second, her mind couldn't decide which horror was worse, that her son had touched the man, or that the money was right there where anyone could accuse him. Her body decided for her. She rushed forward and grabbed Micah by the arm, yanking him back so fast he stumbled. The yellow glove slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a soft, useless sound. "I'm sorry," she cried immediately, the words tumbling out before anyone could speak. "I'm so sorry, sir. He didn't mean, he didn't know." Micah made a small sound, confused, hurt. "Mama," he tried. He was quiet, she whispered fiercely, not angry at him, just terrified. She stepped fully in front of him, spreading her arms like they could shield him from anything. Her back pressed against her son's small chest. She could feel him shaking. She didn't look at the money. She couldn't. She focused on the chair, on the man, on the silence that had fallen over the room like a held breath. "Please," Nia said, her voice breaking now. "Please don't hurt him. He's just a child." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep going. "I shouldn't have brought him here. That's on me. I didn't have childcare. I didn't have a choice. But whatever you think happened, it's my fault." Her knees trembled. She didn't care if she collapsed. She only cared that Micah stayed standing. "Fire me," she said. "Blacklist me. I'll leave. I won't say a word to anyone. Just please, he's 7. He doesn't understand the rules here." Micah clutched the back of her uniform. "Mama," he whispered, scared now, finally understanding the danger. She reached back blindly and squeezed his hand, grounding him. The room stayed quiet. Too quiet. Then Kang Jae-suk moved. His eyes opened. Fully. Deliberately. The shift was instant. 1 second, he looked like a man resting. The next, he looked like a man who missed nothing. His gaze landed on Nia first. Then Micah behind her. Then the glove on the floor. Then the briefcase. His face gave nothing away. No anger. No mercy. Just control. Nia felt her breath leave her body. This was it. She had seen this look before, not on him, but on men like him. The look that came before consequences. Kang Jae-suk sat up slowly, straightening his jacket with the same careful movement Micah had tried to copy earlier. The irony nearly crushed her. "You touched me," he said. Not a question. A statement. The words felt heavy, like a door closing. Nia nodded immediately. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." Micah whimpered behind her. "He was worried." Nia rushed on. "He thought you were sick." "He wasn't trying to." "Stop," Kang Jae-suk said quietly. The word froze her in place. "No one," he continued, standing now, his height filling the room, "touches me without permission." The air felt thin. Nia's legs finally gave in just a little, but she forced herself upright. "I understand," she said. "I do." Her voice shook, but something fierce lived underneath it now. "I take full responsibility. Whatever punishment you decide, it's on me, not him." She didn't beg anymore. She stood there and waited. Micah pressed his face into her back, tears soaking through her uniform. Kang Jae-suk watched them. Really watched them. The way she didn't push the boy away. The way she didn't blame him. The way she stood like losing everything was acceptable as long as her son was safe. He walked past them. Slow. Measured. Nia flinched but didn't move. He stopped at the glass case along the wall, the one holding the items from his family's past. His finger traced the glass lightly. "This," he said, not turning around, "is history." He pointed to a tiny mark on the frame. Small. Almost invisible. "A scratch," he continued. "Damage like this requires repair." Nia's heart dropped again. "Sir," she said quickly, stepping forward just a little, "my son never went near that case. He stayed by the chair." "I swear." Kang Jae-suk turned his head slightly. "Are you calling me a liar?" The room seemed to shrink. Nia's words died in her throat. Micah shook his head behind her, confused, scared. Kang Jae-suk turned fully now, his gaze sharp. "The repair," he said calmly, "will cost $5,000. The number hit Nia like a blow. 5,000. Her vision blurred. That was more than she had ever held at once. More than she could save in years. Kang Jae-suk watched her face carefully. This was the real test. This was where people broke. This was where parents turned on children. Where love became conditional. Where truth bent under pressure. Nia took a shaking breath. I have $800, she said quietly. You can take all of it. Micah sobbed behind her. I'll work for free, she continued. As long as it takes. I'll take extra shifts. I'll do anything. She didn't look back at Micah. Didn't blame him. Didn't hesitate. Kang Jae-suk's eyes narrowed slightly. And if that's not enough? Nia's voice cracked. Then I'll find another job. I'll sell what I own. I'll figure it out. She finally turned, just for a second, and pressed her forehead gently against Micah's. It's okay, she whispered to him. Mama's got you. Micah cried harder. Kang Jae-suk felt something tighten in his chest. This was not how the story usually went. And then he looked at Micah. Does the boy have anything to offer? He asked. The question sliced through the room. Micah lifted his head. And before his mother could stop him, he stepped forward. If your chest feels heavy right now, you're feeling exactly what this moment is meant to carry. Subscribe, because what this child offers next will decide who walks out of this room broken, and who walks out changed forever. The words hung in the air long after Kang Jae-suk spoke them. $5,000. Nia felt the room tilt. 5,000 wasn't just a number. It was months of rent. It was groceries. School clothes. Medicine. It was time she didn't have and money she would never see all at once. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Micah clutched her uniform harder, his small fingers digging into the fabric like it could anchor him. Kang Jae-suk stood near the glass case, calm as still water. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. That was what made it worse. This piece, he said, tapping the wooden frame lightly, belongs to my family. It cannot be repaired by just anyone. Nia forced herself to speak. Sir, she said, her voice shaking but steady enough to be heard, my son never went near that case. He stayed by your chair. I watched him. Kang Jae-suk turned his head slowly. You were not in the room. The words were simple. Final. Nia swallowed. Her throat burned. I'm not saying you're wrong, she said carefully, choosing each word like it might explode if handled poorly. I'm just saying, he didn't mean to cause any damage. He's 7. Kang Jae-suk walked back toward them. Each step felt measured, deliberate. Like he was closing a distance that had always been there. 7 is old enough to understand rules, he said. Old enough to follow instructions. Micah's shoulders shook as he cried quietly. Nia felt something rise in her chest. Not anger. Not defiance. Resolve. I take responsibility, she said again. Whatever he did, it's on me. Kang Jae-suk studied her face. The tired eyes. The way her hands shook even as she stood firm. The way she didn't once push the boy away. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. This was when parents usually cracked. They shouted. They blamed. They turned on their own to save themselves. $5,000, he repeated. How do you intend to pay? Nia didn't hesitate. I have 800 in savings, she said. You can have all of it. Today. Kang Jae-suk said nothing. I'll work, she continued quickly. I'll come in on my days off. I'll take extra shifts. I'll clean whatever you need. That will not be enough, he said calmly. Her chest tightened, but she didn't look at Micah. Then I'll find another job, she said. 2 jobs. I'll sell what I own. I'll sell my grandmother's ring. I'll make it right. The words came faster now, but there was no panic in them. Just determination. I won't let my son pay for this, she finished. Kang Jae-suk waited. Watched. This was where the turn usually came. This was where voices rose. Where fingers pointed. Where love broke under the weight of survival. He waited for her to look at the boy. She didn't. He waited for her to say his name with blame in it. She didn't. Instead, she reached back and rested her hand on Micah's head, pulling him closer. It's okay, she whispered to him. Mama's here. Something shifted in the room. Kang Jae-suk felt it even if he didn't show it. He turned his gaze to Micah. And what does the boy say? He asked. The question landed hard. Nia's breath caught. Before she could stop him, Micah stepped forward. His legs shook, but he stood straight. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve and looked up at the man towering over him. "It was my fault," Micah said quietly. Nia turned sharply. "Micah." He shook his head at her. "I touched you," he said to Kang Jae-suk. "Mama told me not to move, but I did." That wasn't true. Kang Jae-suk knew it. But the boy said it anyway. "I don't have money," Micah continued, his voice trembling now. "But I have something else." His small hand went into his pocket. Nia's heart slammed. "Micah, no." He pulled it out slowly. A metal tag hung from a thin, worn string. Old. Scratched. The letters faded but still there. Micah held it with both hands like it was fragile. "This was my dad's," he said. "He was in the army. He died when I was little." Nia's breath broke. "He gave it to me," Micah went on, tears spilling now. "Mama said it was all we had left of him." He lifted it higher. "It's not worth much," he said. "But it's mine. You can take it." The room went silent. Kang Jae-suk stared at the small piece of metal. Worthless in money. Priceless in meaning. Micah's arms shook as he held it out. "I don't want Mama to work for free for years," he whispered. "She's always tired. She cries when she thinks I'm asleep." Nia covered her mouth, sobbing now. Kang Jae-suk reached out and took the dog tag. The metal was warm from the boy's hands. In that instant, Kang Jae-suk understood something he had avoided his entire life. This child had given up the only thing that mattered to him. Not to gain, not to escape, but to protect. The test was finished, and Kang Jae-suk was the one exposed. If this moment just cut deeper than you expected, don't turn away from it. Subscribe now, because what Kang Jae-suk does next will decide whether power finally bows to love, or whether sacrifice demands a price no child should ever pay. The dog tag lay in Kang Jae-suk's palm. Small, light, worn smooth by time and touch. It weighed almost nothing. And yet, in that moment, it felt heavier than any weapon he had ever held. Micah's arms dropped slowly after letting it go, like releasing it had taken something out of him. His shoulders shook as quiet sobs escaped his chest. He didn't try to hide them. He just stood there, emptied, staring at the floor. Nia couldn't breathe. "No, no, no," she whispered, reaching for him. She pulled Micah into her arms, pressing his head into her chest like she could protect him from the choice he had just made. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't do anything wrong." Micah clung to her, crying harder now. "I didn't want you to suffer," he said through tears. "I don't want you to be tired forever." Those words landed in the room like a quiet explosion. Kang Jae-suk didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. He stared at the tag in his hand. He had taken bribes worth more than this without blinking. He had signed deals that destroyed families with less thought than it took to turn a page. But this was different. This wasn't payment. This was sacrifice. He looked at the boy, 7 years old, standing there shaking, offering the last piece of his father to save his mother from a debt that was never real. Something inside Kang Jae-suk stalled. Not slowed. Stopped. Memories surfaced without permission. A father's voice he barely remembered. A home long gone. A version of himself that once believed people could be good. He had buried that boy under years of violence and control. Now another child stood in front of him, holding that same belief like it was natural. Kang Jae-suk closed his fingers around the dog tag. The metal pressed into his skin. It hurt. Good. Pain meant he was still human. "This test," he began, then stopped. His voice didn't sound right. He looked at Nia. She was crying openly now, her face pressed into her son's hair, rocking him gently. Not begging anymore. Not pleading. Just holding him. Prepared to lose everything. Kang Jae-suk had seen loyalty bought with money. He had seen fear dressed up as respect. He had never seen love like this. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt. The movement shocked the room. Nia froze. Micah lifted his head, eyes wide. Kang Jae-suk lowered himself until he was eye level with the child. The chair behind him loomed empty now, stripped of its power. "I lied," Kang Jae-suk said quietly. The words hung there. "The scratch on the case," he continued. It was there long before today. Nia's breath caught. What? She whispered. The debt, he said. It was never real. Micah stared at him, confusion and fear mixing on his face. Kang Jae-suk held up the dog tag between them. I left the money open, he said. I pretended to sleep. I wanted to see who would take it. Nia felt dizzy. You were testing us, she said. Yes, he replied. And I failed. Micah's crying slowed, his eyes fixed on the dog tag. You didn't take the money, Kang Jae-suk said to him. You didn't even look at it. You came to check on me. He swallowed. No one has done that in a very long time. The silence that followed was thick. I believed something, Kang Jae-suk went on, his voice lower now rougher. I believed that given the chance, people would always choose themselves. He looked at Nia. You didn't. Then he looked back at Micah. And you gave up the only thing that mattered to you to protect your mother. His hand trembled slightly. That is not weakness, he said. That is strength. Micah sniffed. You're not mad, he asked quietly. Kang Jae-suk shook his head once. No, he said. I am ashamed. He held the dog tag out toward Micah. I cannot accept this. Micah hesitated, then took it back with trembling fingers, clutching it to his chest like it might disappear. Kang Jae-suk rose slowly to his feet. He turned toward the desk. Toward the briefcase. He closed it with a firm click, then lifted it. Nia's eyes widened. This, Kang Jae-suk said, holding it out to her, is yours. Nia shook her head violently. No. I can't. You can, he interrupted gently. And you will. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. Use it to leave the place that's breaking you, he said. Use it to rest. To breathe. Tears streamed down Nia's face as she took the handle. Thank you, she whispered, barely able to speak. Kang Jae-suk looked back at Micah. There is something else, he said. If you are willing. Micah nodded slowly. I want to help you, Kang Jae-suk continued. To guide you. To make sure you never have to stand in rooms like this again. Micah glanced at his mother. Nia nodded, tears still falling. Okay, Micah said. They shook hands. Small fingers. Scarred knuckles. In that simple gesture, something shifted. Kang Jae-suk felt anchored. For the first time in his life, not by fear, but by trust. If this just cracked something open in you, don't close it too fast. Subscribe, because the final chapter reveals what this single moment grows into, and why the world Kang Jae-suk built will never belong to him again. Kang Jae-suk did not let the moment end quickly. He stood there, the study quieter than it had ever been, looking at Nia and Micah like they were something fragile he hadn't known how to touch before. The scratch, he said finally, his voice steady now, grounded. It was already there. Months old. Nia felt her knees weaken. The debt, he continued, was never real. I created it. Micah frowned. Why? Kang Jae-suk looked down at him. Really looked at him. Because I believed something terrible, he said. I believed people only loved until it became costly. He turned his gaze to Nia. You proved me wrong. Then he gestured toward the briefcase. The money was bait, he said. A test I've used my whole life. Nia stared at it like it might vanish. You didn't take it, Kang Jae-suk said softly. Neither of you did. And your son, his voice tightened, gave me something far more valuable than money. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the dog tag. Micah's breath caught. Kang Jae-suk held it carefully, then placed it back into Micah's small hands. I won't keep this, he said. Not forever. Micah clutched it to his chest. But, Kang Jae-suk added, I'd like to borrow it. Just for now. Micah tilted his head. So I remember, Kang Jae-suk said quietly, that goodness still exists. That I was wrong. Micah nodded slowly. Okay. Kang Jae-suk turned back to Nia and placed the briefcase in front of her. This is not payment, he said. It's a gift. Use it to leave the place that's been breaking you. Tears streamed freely down Nia's face as she accepted it with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to. You don't need to, he said. You already did. Then he looked at Micah again. There's something else, he said. If you want it. Micah stood straighter. I can help guide you, Kang Jae-suk continued. Education. Tutors. A future where rooms like this never scare you again. When you're older, a place in my legal businesses. Not crime. Not violence. Micah glanced at his mother. Nia nodded through tears. Yes, Micah said. I want that. Kang Jae-suk extended his hand. Micah shook it. And in that moment, something old and broken inside Kang Jae-suk finally rested. 10 years later, Kang Jae-suk died in his sleep. Peacefully. No blood. No betrayal. No enemies waiting in the dark. Just a quiet end to a loud life. The funeral was crowded. Men in dark suits with sharp eyes. Relatives who hadn't spoken to him in years. People who came not to mourn, but to measure what they might gain. Among them sat a young man in a tailored black suit. Micah Carter. 17 now. Tall. Calm. His eyes carried kindness the world hadn't managed to beat out of him. Beside him sat Nia, no longer a cleaner. She led a foundation that helped single mothers rebuild their lives. Her strength was quieter now, steadier. The will was read in the same study where everything had begun. One by one, names were called. And one by one, hopes died. No inheritance. No empire. No fortune. Anger rose. Confusion followed. Then the attorney cleared his throat. I leave the entirety of my legitimate empire, he read, to Micah Carter, my adopted nephew and chosen heir. The room exploded. Micah stayed still. The attorney continued, reading Kang Jae-suk's final words. 10 years ago, a child walked past money and chose concern. He offered me everything he had to protect his mother. He asked for nothing. He taught me that wealth without character is poverty. The attorney opened a small box and handed it to Micah. Inside lay the dog tag. Restored. Polished. Framed with care. A note rested beneath it. You gave this to save your mother. I kept it to save myself. Now it returns to you honored. Asterisk. Micah closed his eyes, tears falling freely. The room emptied quietly after that. The greedy left with nothing. The deserving walked away changed. Some lives are inherited. Others are earned. And one small act of kindness had not only passed a test, it had rewritten a man's soul and redirected an empire. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that kindness still matters, subscribe. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us who we can still choose to be. Kang Jae-suk did not let the moment end quickly. He stood there, the study quieter than it had ever been, looking at Nia and Micah like they were something fragile he hadn't known how to touch before. The scratch, he said finally, his voice steady now, grounded. It was already there. Months old. Nia felt her knees weaken. The debt, he continued, was never real. I created it. Micah frowned. Why? Kang Jae-suk looked down at him. Really looked at him. Because I believed something terrible, he said. I believed people only loved until it became costly. He turned his gaze to Nia. You proved me wrong. Then he gestured toward the briefcase. The money was bait, he said. A test I've used my whole life. Nia stared at it like it might vanish. You didn't take it, Kang Jae-suk said softly. Neither of you did. And your son, his voice tightened, gave me something far more valuable than money. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the dog tag. Micah's breath caught. Kang Jae-suk held it carefully, then placed it back into Micah's small hands. I won't keep this, he said. Not forever. Micah clutched it to his chest. But, Kang Jae-suk added, I'd like to borrow it. Just for now. Micah tilted his head. So I remember, Kang Jae-suk said quietly, that goodness still exists. That I was wrong. Micah nodded slowly. Okay. Kang Jae-suk turned back to Nia and placed the briefcase in front of her. This is not payment, he said. It's a gift. Use it to leave the place that's been breaking you. Tears streamed freely down Nia's face as she accepted it with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to. You don't need to, he said. You already did. Then he looked at Micah again. There's something else, he said. If you want it. Micah stood straighter. I can help guide you, Kang Jae-suk continued. Education. Tutors. A future where rooms like this never scare you again. When you're older, a place in my legal businesses. Not crime. Not violence. Micah glanced at his mother. Nia nodded through tears. Yes, Micah said. I want that. Kang Jae-suk extended his hand. Micah shook it. And in that moment, something old and broken inside Kang Jae-suk finally rested. 10 years later, Kang Jae-suk died in his sleep. Peacefully. No blood. No betrayal. No enemies waiting in the dark. Just a quiet end to a loud life. The funeral was crowded. Men in dark suits with sharp eyes. Relatives who hadn't spoken to him in years. People who came not to mourn, but to measure what they might gain. Among them sat a young man in a tailored black suit. Micah Carter. 17 now. Tall. Calm. His eyes carried kindness the world hadn't managed to beat out of him. Beside him sat Nia, no longer a cleaner. She led a foundation that helped single mothers rebuild their lives. Her strength was quieter now, steadier. The will was read in the same study where everything had begun. One by one, names were called. And one by one, hopes died. No inheritance. No empire. No fortune. Anger rose. Confusion followed. Then the attorney cleared his throat. I leave the entirety of my legitimate empire, he read, to Micah Carter, my adopted nephew and chosen heir. The room exploded. Micah stayed still. The attorney continued, reading Kang Jae-suk's final words. 10 years ago, a child walked past money and chose concern. He offered me everything he had to protect his mother. He asked for nothing. He taught me that wealth without character is poverty. The attorney opened a small box and handed it to Micah. Inside lay the dog tag. Restored. Polished. Framed with care. A note rested beneath it. You gave this to save your mother. I kept it to save myself. Now it returns to you, honored. Asterisk. Micah closed his eyes, tears falling freely. The room emptied quietly after that. The greedy left with nothing. The deserving walked away changed. Some lives are inherited. Others are earned. And one small act of kindness had not only passed a test, it had rewritten a man's soul and redirected an empire. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that kindness still matters, subscribe. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us who we can still choose to be.